Our guest this week on our Live It speaker series is Professor Curtis Anderson at the BYU School of Law. Kurt and I have been friends now for
Long time.
it's over 20 years. So Kurt's background is he attended BYU for undergrad, right?
Mhm.
And then also law school. And following law school, worked for a few firms, which I'm sure we'll hear about. And we met when you were working with, I believe you just right after you started with Baker Botts. So Kurt
Yep.
worked with one of the top law firms in the country, and following a pretty long stint as a partner doing transactional law at Baker Botts, you were the general counsel of, is it Match Corp?
It started off as Match.com Inc. And then by the time I left, it was Match Group, which was a lot bigger and a lot of acquisitions. And we can talk about that later.
That's like an $8-9 billion
Yeah.
entity organization. And and I know we'll talk about that, but this means we have Professor Anderson to thank for anybody who's listening that's participated in Match.com or Tinder.
Yeah, we had a little company come out of a hackathon when I was general counsel at Match that was internally generated called Tinder. You may have heard of it. And so I was Tinder's general counsel for the first 5 years of its existence, which was a wild ride.
So there may be one or two people that have to owe you a thanks.
Yeah.
And then, how is it 4
There's
5
probably a
years
lot of
ago?
people that owe me, probably a little angry as well. But
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
About 4 or 5 years ago, you interviewed, I think there was like 200 or 300 applicants, I think, for
I don't know what the number was, but
a lot.
the applications, the position I have at BYU Law is a little bit unique in the sense that they wanted one professor that can teach students how to do deals, how to how to do transactions. Because in law schools, it's very focused on litigation typically. And so they created a position that requires significant experience, has no publishing requirement, no research requirement. All you do is have a heavier teaching load and work more with students. And yeah, that's a pretty appealing position for a lot of people. So I think there are a lot of people were very interested in that unique opportunity. So,
is it 5 years?
yep,
5
started
years?
in August of 2015.
Great.
And I had a year where I overlapped, where I was still general counsel of Match for about a year with that job as well to sort of replace me. Sometimes those take a while to replace. So yeah, 2015 I moved out to Provo, and here we are.
Kurt's been married to Margie for how long now?
Oh boy, we were married in 1989, so I should know this is like 31 or 32 years.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It's over 30. I think it just freezes.
We had 30. Yeah,
I think there's 30 and then there's just 40.
35. Yeah.
Yeah. And 2 children?
Yep. I have a son, my youngest. He lives in Washington, D.C. With his wife and their daughter. His name is Seth. His wife is McKenna, and their little girl is Olive. And then my daughter went back to Dallas, where she was raised with my son. And her name is Alexis, and her husband's name is Keenan, and they have a little boy named James, and they just had a little girl named Lily. I guess it's Liliana, 2 days ago. So they have 2 kids, and son has 1 kid.
So Grandpa Anderson
Yeah.
is joining us.
Yeah, 3 of them now.
Yeah, that's very, very exciting.
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think
they're-
Margie's in Dallas right now.
Yeah, so Margie
Yeah.
flew out. My daughter is she works for Ernst & Young.
Uh-huh.
She is a tax accountant. She works in their tax exempt organizations group, foundations, hospitals, that kind of stuff. And so she has time off, and her husband's a high school teacher if you're familiar with Dallas, in the Oak Cliff area, sort of downtown Dallas. And so there's sort of a lot going on. So yeah, Margie flew down for a few weeks to sort of help out. I think she volunteered to fly down. I don't think she was really asked, but she's excited to be down there.
Well, Kurt, thanks for being willing to be on the podcast today. And it's Kurt knows this, but for those who are listening, watching, Kurt's one of my oldest and most valued friendship. And we met, I think, earlier in our careers. I just started my first pest control company. Probably had less than 50 customers when we first met. And you were not a partner yet.
Mayday Pest Control.
Yeah, you were not a partner yet in a law firm. And so we've kind of been there through raising our children together and just experiencing life. And for me, it's been a treasured friendship. But let's go back to the where you're from.
Okay.
I mean, you are at the top of your profession, and we try to do that here with this particular podcast, is invite people who are at the top of whatever hill they were climbing, and so it's just, I think it's helpful to know the journey.
Yeah, no, it is. It's been for my profession, right? There's, again, I'm a transactional lawyer. I do mergers and acquisitions. I take companies public. Did a lot of work like that. And yeah, there was sort of it's typically a two-headed monster, although I've been very fortunate to make it a three-headed monster when you say, sort of what can you aspire to? First is work for a large international law firm and make partner of that firm. And then the second head is often becoming a general counsel of a public company. And Match was owned by a public company, and then we went public just as I left. And then the third one, which is a little bit unique, is then teach transactional law at law school. And so
checked all three boxes.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate, and I've really actually enjoyed my career trajectory. But that being said, it's not, if you would have asked me to outline or predict what my career was going to look like coming out of law school, I would not have been remotely close to what actually happened. And that's sort of the first thing I often like to talk with people about is, I think it's great to have goals, and I think it's great to have these expectations of where you want to be when you're 25 and 30 and 35 and 40 and whatnot. And I think it's shockingly sad if you actually predict where you're going to be when you're 25 years old or 30 years old or even 20 years old. And so it's this hybrid of, you need to be having expectations and goals and working towards something. But I have found that the most interesting and fun positions or opportunities are the ones that sort of come out of nowhere, and you put yourself in a position to be able to take advantage of it. And because I grew up in Cedar City, Utah, which is southern Utah, it's actually closer to Vegas than it is to Salt Lake. The first flight I ever took in my life was when I went on my mission. I had never flown on an airplane. Before I left my mission, I served in Alaska, which was sort of the start of a good string of good luck for me. I really loved serving in Alaska. And my dad was a high school teacher, and a really good high school teacher. I had him as a teacher, and probably one of the best teachers I've ever had. But I had a pretty small view of the world and a pretty small view of sort of where my place was in it. And so if I'm predicting what I want it to be and what I want it to do, I remember coming home from a run, my first job. So I went to BYU undergrad, studied Near Eastern Studies, Islamic philosophy, very, liberal arts, stuff. Stayed at BYU to go to law school, and I started off with a small firm in Salt Lake. And I remember coming home from a run one day, and I still pretty clearly remember this. It was pretty early because I had to, get up, catch the bus to get in downtown. And I was sitting on my porch, and the sun was coming up, and I thought, man, I wonder what it'd be like to fill out my tax returns once and put 6 figures as my income. I just thought, how could you spend all that money? And that was literally my worldview, right? And that's still a lot of money. I'm not saying that's not a lot of money. But that just showed that I thought, I'm just going to have a very simple little life, a very simple little career. Maybe if I could just make $100,000 once in my life, that would be so cool. And I'll just say that my life trajectory was very, very different than what I expected it to be coming out of law school and even coming out of undergrad. Another example would be is we thought we were going to have a really big family. And, we have 2 kids there, and we had a lot of miscarriages. And all of a sudden we sort of wake up one day and realized, sort of this plan that we had, sort of these goals that we had, how we viewed our life is going to be not even remotely like that. And, I'm of the view now that you couldn't design a better family to have just 2 kids, because I do things with my kids and we have relationships with our kids that I would never have been able to have if I have 11 kids or 6 kids. And I was having a conversation with my stake president one time in Dallas. We can get to how I get to Dallas in a minute. And I knew him pretty well, and we were talking one time. I was a bishop at the time in a YSA board out there, and I leaned back and I said, President, I sort of feel bad that you have so many kids, because you don't have the time to really interact with your kids like I do. And he laughed and he leaned back and he said, I feel so bad that you only have 2 kids, And it's very true. I mean, I think that there's a lot of good about whatever circumstances you're in. And my only point is that when I was predicting what my life was going to look like when I was in my 20s and early 30s, it ended up being very different than I thought it was going to be.
So how did you meet Margie?
So I was a junior in high school, and she was a sophomore. But our birthdays are like 2 months apart. So we were roughly the same age. Her dad was a senior league baseball coach of mine when I was in 9th grade.
So your dad's a high school teacher, and your future father-in-law is your baseball coach.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a small town story.
Yeah, exactly. And so I knew her family. I didn't really know her very well. And one of my friends came up to me one day and said, I got some in my eye right here, asked me if I wanted to go on a group date. And this is, again, in Cedar City, so there's not a lot of stuff to do down there. But we decided they wanted to go bowling on a Tuesday night. And I thought, well, it's a little odd to do bowling on a Tuesday, but I thought, sure, why not? I wasn't a big dater in high school, and I was, I just barely dating anyway. I was, we didn't date until we were 16 in that world, and I had just turned 16. And he said, and I know exactly who you should ask. And he said, I think you should ask Margie Walker. And she was a year younger than me. I didn't really know her. I don't think I've ever talked to her before. She was a cheerleader, just this little 5'3", blonde-haired, spunky little, fun person. But I didn't know. And so I said, okay, let's go set it up now, he said. So he walked me over to her lockers. We all used lockers back then, and introduced us. And I asked her, do you want to, we're going to go bowling with the group on Tuesday. Do you want to go bowling with me? And she said, I don't know, which I didn't really know what to do with that, because it was hard enough for me just to get up the courage to even ask her. She said, I don't know because I'm grounded, and so I have to see if I'm grounded, if I can or can't. And I said, okay. So she went home and asked her parents, and they said, yeah, she could go. She dated a lot more than me. That's why she kept breaking curfew, and so she kept getting grounded. So anyway, she could go, and so we went on this date, and then we went bowling, and then we did this murder we went to the park and played this squeeze the hand murder game. We played, I don't know, when we were young. And I remember instead of holding hands like this, we held hands like that. So it was like a big deal to me, like interlocked fingers. I'm like, oh wow, this is like really cool. And so the next day, I was talking to this friend of mine again who set it up, and with a couple of other friends that were in this little group, and I said, I really like that Margie girl. I want to ask her out again. And everyone started laughing at me in the group. And I sort of paused, and it's like, I don't get what's so funny. And one of my other friends, who was a friend of the guy who set us up, he said, you don't understand what's going on, do you? And I said, no, I don't, apparently. And Margie had a rule, her parents had a rule that she had to date somebody in between. She couldn't date the same person 2 times in a row. And so the guy that set this up,
who walked you over to her locker?
Who walked me over, introduced us. They were like really dating. They were like, back then you say they were going steady.
Boyfriend,
girlfriend. And he had asked her out the weekend before, and he wanted to ask her out the next weekend. And so for him to be able to do that, he had to manufacture a date in between and have somebody else ask her out, so that he wouldn't be the 2 times in a row. So this entire dating scheme was so Margie and him could go out and date again. And I was like this pawn in this little scheme that they had.
Why did he not have the courtesy of just telling you what
he
was doing?
They did. And then I don't know.
It might have gone differently had he done that.
That's probably true. That's very true.
Yeah.
That's true. Actually, it probably, that's right. We might not have interacted fingers, and then that would have started the whole thing.
Yeah.
Got married 10 years or 5 years later, whatever it was. So anyway, for the next couple of years of high school, I was sort of an in-betweener from time to time. Whenever Margie needed an in-between date, and it was usually with some other different boy, I was like this token guy, like, oh, ask Kurt.
You were in the lineup.
I was the lineup. I'd go in. I would do the token in between date so she could do it. That's how we actually met. And then I got back from my mission. We ran into each other right, like the first or second weekend. And I was at BYU. She was at SUU. And, I moved from the in-betweener to the full-timer.
Where did the other guy go? When did he drop out?
He dropped out a few months after that date, and then it was another guy that she would stay with. So I think I in-betweened with her like at least 3 times, or at least doubled with her 3 times, and she was always with a different guy. She was sort of a player.
So
I wasn't. I was just this kind person who I just helped people.
Of course. So when you became the primary person, did you have to find in-betweeners, or were we past that by then?
She was. So again, this is Southern Utah. Her dad was an institute teacher, and so once she got to be like 17, like when graduation high school was on the verge, it flipped very quickly from every other person to get married now. And so at that point, it became very much like, you need to be dating steady, you need to get married immediately, because it is Southern Utah, and once you're 18, if you're not married, or 19, people start to talk.
Wow.
In the 80s.
Wow, in the 80s.
In the 80s. No, it wasn't that bad, but no. By then, it was very much like you should be getting married, kind of a thing.
So where were you in college when you got married? I mean, like by where? Sophomore year?
Yeah, so I had a quick undergrad experience. So I took a bunch of AP classes back before AP classes were even cool. So we actually got real credit for them. I took an abnormal amount for people around me. I was young. And so I graduated. I went to BYU my summer right after I graduation, then went fall, winter. So by the time I came back from my mission, I was halfway through my junior year. So I then went fall, winter, got married, spring, summer, fall, winter, graduated. So I graduated when I was 22 with serving a mission. I graduated from law school at 25. And so I was young, but we were about a year out of law school when we got married.
So for those interested in going to law school, I assume you did pretty well academically in high school and in college?
Yeah, I was sort of a grinder. I have 2. My kids are, one of my kids is just sort of a hard, knows the grindstone, just steady, and that was more like me. My other one, my other child is just photographic memory. They both did well in college. But they have sort of different skills. And I think I do have I had a pretty decent memory. I just sort of could remember things. But I was just I'm just a hard worker, to be honest with you. So yeah, I did all right in school.
So how did you arrive on, is it Arabic studies and philosophy?
Yeah, so I ended up...
I've never talked to anyone before.
Yeah,
Arabic studies. I didn't even know such a thing existed.
Yeah.
Was there 2 of you over there or what?
Yeah, no. Well, the story is you talk to people in the Near Eastern Studies program, and you go to your counselor and you ask them, what do I do with this degree? And the counselor will say, you go to a graduate school and get your master's degree. And then you ask your counselor there, what do I do with this master's degree? And they say, you go to a different school and you get a PhD. And then you go to your PhD counselor, your doctorate counselor, and ask them, or your mentor, and say, what do I do with this doctorate? And they say, you gotta go teach other students their bachelor's degrees. And what do? Well, they will go get their master's degree. And what do? They'll go get their PhD. What do? Well, then they'll teach. And you realize it's not really much of a career path. It's more like Amway with a football program, with the school there.
No, I mean, but why did you do it?
So
I mean, like that seems like a very deliberate decision.
Yeah. So I ended up, when I was a junior in high school, there was a professor from BYU, sort of went down I-15, started off in Provo, and just sort of hit the bigger cities. It wasn't a lot. Hit Cedar City, St. George, and then down into Vegas, and had a meeting with students that had a certain GPA or a student ACT or something. I don't know what it was. And it was convinced them to come to BYU for a camp to get 2 college credits to take the introductory course for a brand new major they were starting. And they were recruiting to fill this major. And this new major was computer science. So it was like a brand new thing.
God love the 80s.
Yeah, that's right. We didn't even have, we were barely getting computers in high schools.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like we had our computers, like the high school had like 4 of them. And I ended up going to this camp. I was good at math, and they said, if you're good at math, you should be good at computers, which is not true, by the way. And so I ended up, between my junior and senior year, I ended up at this computer camp, made a lot of really fun friends of all places from West Jordan, Utah. that I kept in contact with for quite a while. And then finished my senior year, went back to BYU, and I was going to be a computer science major. And about 2 semesters in, I knew I really wasn't going to be a computer science major. I did okay in the classes, but when I was done, I was out the door playing basketball or playing Ultimate or whatever else. And most of the people in my program, they would get their work done, and then they would do what their real love is, which is coding. And they would spend all night doing their own stuff. And I just didn't have that same level of interest, and I could tell pretty quickly I wasn't going to be able to compete very well in this space without having this just drive and passion to do computer work. And so there's
a lesson to be learned there, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say you dodged a bullet because that was a dead end.
Yeah, computer science as a coding.
You're just
what,
kidding,
what,
right?
What good did it do people? That's right.
Yeah,
And
but you
so that's why I started.
Decision. You realize competitive. Hey, I'm 5'4". I'm 5'4". I weigh 120. Maybe I shouldn't try to be a center in the NBA, right?
That's right. Yeah, the old adage from the Disney movies that if you just dream it, you can become it. It just ain't true. It just isn't. It isn't true. There are some things that I could dream as much as I wanted to, and I probably could not get to the same level of success that I would really be happy with. So my last semester before my mission, I then sort of backed out of my computer classes and sort of defaulted into stuff. My dad was a history teacher. I loved history. I already clept out or AP'd out on most of my GEs, and so I'm taking 300 level courses my freshman year. So I took some history classes, and that I knew how to enjoy. And so I'm getting in the car when my mom and dad picked me up. And back then he didn't have mobile phones, and so I didn't talk to my parents at all during the semester. It was just too expensive. Long distance was too expensive. So this is the first time I'm talking to my parents, like the entire semester since Christmas break. And my dad asked me, like, so how'd your semester go? What are you thinking about? And I said, well, it's not going to be computer science. I do like my history. I like the liberal arts. I like political science and philosophy, but I don't really want to be a teacher, a high school teacher. And so I didn't really know what, I was going to do, but I had my mission to kick the can down the road. And I remember driving out of Helaman Halls. I was in Hinckley Hall, and turning onto Canyon Road or whatever it is. And I'm in the back of our minivan. My 5 brothers and sisters are all in the front. They were going to go see our grandparents on the way home. And my dad just said out of nowhere, well, maybe you should think about law school. And it was like the roof parted and the sun burnt down and my soul was burning. I thought I never even considered it.
It's like Harry Potter when he held the
it's
right
just,
wand.
Boom, that's what I'm going to do. It was just that simple. It was like that's what I'm going to do.
Music was playing.
Yeah, that's it. And I never second guessed it ever since. So I'm now on my mission. I'm going to go to law school, but I have to pick an undergraduate. And I really got into like Hugh Nibley on my mission, and I got cornered into a couple of lawyers in Fairbanks, where I was serving, that were really read a lot of Nibley, and so I really started getting interested in like Hebrew and ancient scripture and just the Middle East in general, and so I picked that major. And I at one point thought maybe I would go to Jerusalem for a semester, but I really picked Middle East, Near Eastern Studies because it was just something that was really interesting to me, and it ended up being a perfect pre-law because
it was in philosophy too, right?
Yeah, I did. I took a lot of philosophy courses, a lot of political science. I had to learn a language, either Arabic or Hebrew. I did make a fundamental error by choosing Hebrew. I wish I would have chosen Arabic, but it also wasn't a long major. It was not like accounting or where it just takes a long time to get through, or engineering. And so that's the story behind that. It just sort of came out of my mission. It was like, that would be a sort of an interesting major. I'd be able to get into law school quickly. If you want to go to law school, your grades make a pretty big difference. And so it's good to be in something that you enjoy, that you'll be motivated to do well in. And so it worked out well. It was a fun major.
Why did you say it was a mistake choosing Hebrew over Arabic?
Well, not only did I choose...
I would have thought at some point in your career, like some of the stories you had, like with some of the partner discussions you had, that maybe it would have been kind of useful sometimes to know a little bit of Hebrew.
Yeah, it was fun. I have learned that back in the 80s...
People must have been taken back a little bit, like, you
speak
Hebrew?
Yeah, I think that that was the case until.
Did nobody ever say to you, "Are you in the tribe?"
Yeah, no. That's right. I don't know if my Hebrew was ever good enough to do that. But that was probably more the case until the first Gulf War happened. And when the Gulf War happened, the first one with George Sr., Arabic became pretty cool.
Yeah.
And even when I was in the major, I ended up starting out heavy in biblical literature, Middle East with a Hebrew focus, and within one semester I had shifted entirely over to Islam. I just thought Islam was fascinating. I loved studying Islam. So I ended up studying a lot more of Islamic philosophy, political science. I published a paper on Iran. So everything really went hard Islamic bent, but I'm studying Hebrew. So it was sort of a mismatch.
Okay, I get it.
And it's Arabic's just Hebrew's not really used much anymore. There's a little bit of it, obviously, in Israel. But most people are bilingual. But Arabic's still it's a pretty useful language to have.
Yeah. So why BYU Law School?
I applied to BYU and Yale were the only two I applied to. Yale at the time and still is the hardest one to get into. And I stayed at BYU mostly, I think, because of inertia. I had really no expectations of going outside of the state to work. I had no expectations of ever working in a big law firm. I was the first lawyer in my family. I didn't even know what it really meant. I just thought it'd be like some little lawyer in a little practice. And Margie had a good job. It was easy. And it ended up, inertia often has a negative connotation, or it's just in this case, it worked out really well for me because, I really enjoyed law school, and so I really hit my career with a passion for the law, which a lot of people come out of law school just hating it, and I didn't. I really enjoyed law school. I really enjoyed at BYU. It was economically, it was like, of course. I mean, we graduated with no debt. We had money in the bank, which, that money now after sitting and growing in investments for 30 years has grown some. And so
you mean you've had a few years where you've made more than $100,000 in a year?
Yeah, that is true. And not only that, but that money, instead of, that money had been rolled into houses, and it was rolled into stocks, and it was, sort of this little nest egg I always wanted to be able to use if I ever needed it, because I'm relatively always convinced the wall's going to fall down and everything's going to go crazy. So I always have this little nest egg. That nest egg's been sitting there for 30 years. It's become a bigger nest egg. And if I would have gone to a different law school and had a massive amounts of debt, like you typically would do, not only would I be paying off that debt for the next 10 years or 15 years, I wouldn't have necessarily to be growing. So economically, it worked out really well. It worked out really well because I ended up going into a career path that ended up giving me the exact same jobs the top law firms produce, the top law schools produce. So I got really lucky with that. I ended up getting the exact same career path without having to pay the $300,000 investment for it.
So inertia can be good.
In this case, it was. But it was only good because...
By the way, my wife said to me not that long ago, I've been wondering how long you're going to stop doing your college summer job.
Yeah.
So I'm in my late 40s.
You're still.
It's inertia.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Well, and the counter to that is where inertia, where I was lucky enough to ignore inertia. So went to BYU Law, stayed there. I mean, they also gave me scholarship, and it was just, I just didn't know enough yet to know what I was not.
So you're graduating. Let's go to there.
Graduated.
What do I do now?
I ended up with a little firm in Salt Lake that was a little securities boutique, which means they just did like a lot of public and private financing.
Not like a big international
firm.
No,
6-member firm.
Yep, okay.
But really good lawyers. I actually had an offer, the biggest firm in Salt Lake, which I turned down to a lot of people's dismay and shock, and went with this. But this other firm they really were high quality lawyers. They had good little work. And so I'm working there, and whenever anything interesting would come down the pipe, a coast would steal it. A firm from the West Coast or a firm from the East Coast would take it. We never got to do the big stuff. And no Salt Lake firms rarely get to do that. It's one of the bigger firms from the coast they're gonna bring in sort of the big guns, right? People with the deep benches, a lot of experience. And I started wanting to do those deals. And I got a phone call, just random, a headhunter asking me if I wanted to go to like Cleveland or Columbus, Ohio. And I told him, no, I'm not interested in going to Cleveland or Columbus. But I talked to him for a little bit. And so once you talk to him, they will start calling you back. And he said, well, would you like to go anywhere else? And I said, well, I wouldn't mind going to Dallas. And the only reason why I said Dallas is because I was a Cowboys fan. I mean, I like the Dallas Cowboys. I'd never been to Dallas. I had a couple of friends from undergrad that were from Dallas, and they just beelined it back to Dallas as soon as they graduated. So that stuck in my memory. And so he called me back a week later and said, well, how about Atlanta? I said, no, I don't think that's Dallas. He said, well, what about Houston? He said, I still don't have anything from Dallas, but I have these firms in Atlanta and in Houston that may be interested to talk to you.
So everything you're saying makes sense to everybody from Texas.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, we met in Texas. So you say like, why did you say Dallas? And you say because the Cowboys are there. I mean, everyone in
that's right.
Dallas.
Of course.
So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, why else? That's exactly right.
Yeah. How else would you make such
right.
a decision?
That's
the one
exactly
thing
right.
we're wondering is why you didn't go to law school here. Other than that.
That's right. That's exactly right. Like, you don't even need a Cowboys.
Jerry
really.
Jones
Just
recruited.
stop at Texas.
By the way, I liked your story about you were essentially recruited by that traveling recruiter for the new computer science major.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he had a pretty good recruiting pitch.
Yeah.
I'm just going and talking to the smartest people. So you're one of the smartest people. That's only the smartest people get to be a part of this.
Right. And he would probably describe it as, we view grades not as pure intelligence. We view grades as just the people that when you put them somewhere and give them something to do, they do it. Right.
Yeah,
and just they're just reliable and work hard.
But that's a good recruiting pitch, right? Like if you're going to go start anything, you're just saying it's only the elite.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the way my firms all were. There's no doubt about it.
But it's also true, right? There's truth to that. Like whether it's the law firm or whether you're looking at grades or, you know,
your track record says something about you.
Of achievement.
That's right. Your track record says something about you.
It does. Okay, so back to Jerry Jones recruiting.
So
you to Dallas.
So anyway, he called me back next week and said, okay, I have a couple of firms in Dallas. Would you be interested in talking to them? And of course I haven't.
How close are they to the stadium?
That's right. That's right. You know, where are they going? What's they I'll go say the stadium. That's right. So I said sure. So I sent him a resume out. And then he, by 3 firms, and came back and said, 2 of them are interested in talking to you. Do you want to make travel plans to go down? And I hadn't said anything to Margie yet. And so I went home and asked her, hey, I have an opportunity to interview with a couple of firms in Dallas. You want to go to Dallas? And she said, no, I don't want to go to Dallas. I have no interest in leaving Salt Lake.
She didn't say, can we go to Cleveland?
Yeah, no, she's like, I really have no interest in going anywhere, frankly. And so we cut a deal and said, look, let's go down and see what it looks like. And maybe we'll go down for like 2 or 3 years. Just 2 or 3 years, go work for a bigger firm, bigger market, and then we'll come back and go live in some little town and you know, whatever. And so she said, well, I'll go down with you and take a look at it. But I don't think she was very convinced. So we flew down to Dallas, interviewed, got an offer, and you know, I don't think Margie was too keen on it, but she was willing to go with me on it. So this is an example where inertia very much was like, you know, the pay raise wasn't that big of a deal. It was really a nuisance. We had a 2-year-old turning 3.
This wasn't Baker Botts
and a
either,
1-year-old.
right? This
No.
is like intermediate. So is this an international
Yeah,
firm?
no, it was a sort of a Texas-only firm.
Uh-huh.
Probably had 250 or 260 lawyers, which is big compared to Tim.
Yeah.
Much bigger than anything in Utah.
Yeah.
So, and my theory was I'd go down, work with this larger firm, get some experience, and then go in-house and be able to, I'll be coming in back to Utah with experience from a firm much bigger than any firm in Utah, and so that might help me go in-house. And so I went down, and again, we had 2 small children. We had just bought a home in Salt Lake a year before that. It was, I mean, inertia was absolutely, but you know what? It felt like something I should do. And also it was this idea that you're not going to really have big opportunities without sort of taking some risks sometimes. And there was some risks involved with this. I was sort of a superstar at my little firm. I could have just got on autopilot and had,
they try to keep you from staying. I mean, they made that kind of hard.
Oh yeah. They were shocked that I would leave, kind of a thing. And so we did it, and then the 2 to 3 year cap ended up being 21 years. I mean, we just absolutely lived down there. So I stayed at that firm for a couple of years, and then 2 years later, the market was hot, and because I started at smaller firms, I had run my own deals really early, unlike big firms. And so actually starting at smaller firms, but smaller firms with really high quality work and good lawyers, that ended up being a really good thing for me, because I rolled into Baker Botts as a 4th year, and even though my deals had a few zeros, were deficient a few zeros of the size of the purchase price, I was still doing deals, whereas a lot of the associates at Baker Botts, they were working on bigger teams. They were doing smaller points of the deal. And so I just sort of hit the ground running at Baker Botts. And Baker Botts is at the time was 900 lawyers. We had currently offices in, all across the country and in several countries in the world. One of the oldest and most prestigious firms, a firm that would never hire directly out of BYU at the time. They do now, but it was, we hired from Yale and Harvard and Chicago and Stanford and then some Texas schools. And I hit Baker Botts. And
how did you even get the interview? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I had at this other firm for 2 years, which is actually now a big firm too. It's the mergers. It's now like a 1,000-member firm now as well. But it was sort of a second tier firm, and I thought, man, going to the top tier would be sort of cool. And by then, I'm really into it. I really like it. It's going well. The market was hot, as I mentioned. A lot of activity. People looking for associates to do their work. So I interviewed with sort of the top 3 firms in the city, and was getting offers or good nods from all of them. But the top firm was Baker Botts, the hardest one to get into, and I didn't even apply for that one.
What was the Baker at the time? The Secretary of State?
Yeah, his grandfather. Yeah, so James Baker was Secretary of State of George W. Bush during the World War, first Gulf War. James Baker was a spokesperson of George 43 when they did the Gore-Bush. I mean, if you follow the politics at all with the current election, when it looked like President Trump was going to challenge the election results, he pulled aside the elite of the elite in the Republican Party and said, go find me a James Baker. That's literally what he said. Go find me my James Baker. Because James Baker was the guy that ran the Bush's world, and probably the one of the, if not the most respected Secretary of State in the history of the country. Just, his Rolodex is just incredible. So he was one of my partners in Washington D.C. His son was there too. His grandfather was the Baker of Baker Botts. There's a big story.
Some of your other partners, weren't they?
Yeah, a partner 2 floors up for me was sent over to be the ambassador to Saudi Arabia during the Gulf War by George Bush 43. Several of Amy Coney Barrett was an associate who was a Supreme Court Justice. She was an associate in our Washington, D.C. office when I was an associate in the Dallas office. Several of my partners are now federal appellate judges. There's a lot of talent in that firm. And the associate next to me at my second firm when I'm looking at leaving, she asked me, like, why haven't you talked to Baker Botts? But I was talking to her a little bit about the fact that I was going to leave, and her husband was a lawyer at Baker Botts, and I told her, well, I don't really know anybody there, and the firms I've interviewed at are like 2 of them were big New York firms, and one of them was Vincent Elkins, which is another big Texas firm. And she said, well, I think you should talk to Baker Botts. I think you'd like it there. And so she said, let me call my husband. So she called her husband, and I pretty much said, look at this guy. You need to talk to this guy. If you're looking for anyone with experience at a level, he's a good guy. He's fun to work with, super smart, blah, blah, blah. That was what she would say. And so Baker Botts called me up and said, yeah, send your resume up. So I sent my resume to that firm, and we were all in the same building actually. So I sent it down. And I told them, look, I already have an offer from these two firms. Sorry, it's a little late, but and not to be sort of a jerk about it, but I really can't drag them on much longer. And so no worries if you don't have time to fit me in or if it's too fast. But I would love to talk to you obviously, because it was the top firm in the city. I think one of the top firms in the state, if not one of the top in the country. And they got back to me the next day and said, yeah, we actually want to talk to you. Can you come in like tomorrow? So I showed up at noon, went to lunch with and then I did a circle and met with all the partners and all the associates in the office. And I didn't know that behind me, the head of the corporate section was following me and getting sort of real-time assessments as we were going. So I started at noon, came back about 5:30, met back in the partner's office, who was the head of the corporate section, and he made me an offer there on the spot, which, yeah. And when I was like 2 or 3 interviews in, I was like, this is the place I want to go. I loved it. I mean, just personality-wise, it just...
Also, you got to be flattered that the guy like that's following you around.
But I didn't know that. Yeah, I was
when
surprised.
You got the offer, you had to have known.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that don't make a lot of sense to it. If people say, oh, you need to know...
You were holding hands, you didn't even know it.
That's right. You need to know. That's right, interlocking. But
By the way, it's a good thing you didn't go with Vincent Elkins. I mean, aren't they the ones that kind of got dragged down by Enron there?
Yes and no. So they were Enron's main lawyers.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
But the interesting thing about that is when Enron exploded, go back to your point, Enron hired the smartest people.
I remember that.
They were the smart. And so when Enron blew up, everyone's like, oh, poor Vincent Elkins, their largest or one of their largest corporate clients. All that did was that took 40 people that were concentrated in one company and made 40 people in 40 companies, really talented, really successful people. And actually they did okay, because all of a sudden all their connections are now in 40 different companies, and they lost one client and got 40 instead, ultimately, right?
It's like a good marketing plan for a firm in the future, right?
Just you work with good people. Yeah,
I just remember the one partner. Remember we were meeting with Rob, and there was one of who was the firm he was with?
It was a Gibson Dunn.
And there was a partner that had like a $30 million book of business, and they interviewed him, and Gibson Dunn made the strategic decision not to hire him because of the law school that he went to. They just couldn't hire from that law school, even though he was like 20 years into his career, clearly successful.
Yeah, Gibson Dunn, I don't think makes that mistake anymore. But that's what's interesting about Baker Botts. I mean, Baker Botts is very, we call them, resume snobs, right?
Yeah.
And but the fact they didn't have anybody from BYU Law in their firm. All 800 lawyers, not a single BYU Law grad. And
Rob was Virginia, right?
Yeah, he was UVA. Yeah, and yet what that tells you though is that you don't need to let those artificial, so-called, speed bumps get in your way, because, in the end, they had people that they trusted that knew me, that could talk about the work that I did. I mean, the reality is I was married with a couple of kids, which was pretty strange with the associates. Didn't drink, didn't smoke. I mean, I was like the epitome of like just nose to grindstone hard worker. That's like a dream come true for a law firm. They love people that are, stable, they're married, they have people relying on them at home. They don't have drug problems, they don't have alcohol problems. They keep relatively healthy. They hypothetically spent 2 years on a church mission and very comfortable talking with people. They enjoy meeting new people. They're not afraid of taking responsibility, because since they're 12 years old, they've been giving talks in front of large peoples at church, and they have been presidents of quorums, right? And in the end, they really don't care so much where you went to school. They like that type of because you show up every day. When you say you get something done, you get it done. You are reliable, you work hard, you're motivated, and in the end, companies love those type of people.
So they made you the offer. Did you accept right then? Did you go and talk to
I
Margie?
pretty much did,
was,
yeah.
Was Margie saying, what about Utah? I mean, because
No,
I knew you at this point, and I don't remember Margie
this is
saying
right. This
I
is
don't remember
right
her
when you
making
had
an
moved
argument.
in. So
Yeah.
this is right when you had moved in. This is probably 90.
6, 7, 8.
96,
Yeah.
So at this part, there was this little clot of young families that moved into Carrollton, Texas, that were just awesome. I mean, you had just moved in, the Dugals had moved in, Cases, the Woodfields were there, I mean, and others, right? And
that was fortunate for all
yeah,
of us,
and you know what? I stayed in that war for 21 years, and there weren't that many times like that. It was like the times where it was a lot of really talented, good, fun people that moved in.
Yeah.
And so by then we were they were like our family.
Yeah.
And so Margie I think she was like,
still are.
Yeah, no. I mean, I hate to say this, but
the Browns.
If they're the Brown,
yeah.
There are, I have like blood family. If they called and said, look, we've got this, we sort of have this issue. Could use a little help. Hey, could you jump on a plane and fly to like let's assume your daughter was still in Chile. Right?
Yeah.
And if I have like a family member that would say, she's sort of in trouble, could you sort of help us out there? I'd say, let me figure out what I can do, blah, blah, blah. If you called me up and said, hey, Laura's in a bind and we sort of need some help, all you would hear on my phone was my door slamming because I am going to the airport to buy a ticket at the counter to fly to Chile.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. I would say, I am buying a ticket.
Kurt.
I'll be on a plane. I'll be landing in 7 hours. By the time I land there, please tell me what you want me to do. Right? That's the way it was, sort of, you become with some of these people. And so I think because of that, Margie was like, hey, I'm very happy and content here. My kids have great friends. I love the people I'm around. And so I think she was like, I thought this big law firm, international thing, sweatshop, kill you. Here's your partner. You make partner, congratulations. Here are your divorce papers, kind of a thing. I thought you were going to go in house, kind of a thing, right? And that's where it'd be nice to have her telling this version of the story. I think she was still a little leery of. Cause I'm not going to paint a picture, for the listeners. It's tough. I mean, you make good money. But you make good money because there's just not a lot of room for error. And people are paying you a high billing rate and they're expecting the highest quality of work. And, and whenever you're doing a deal, you're sending your work product over to also very smart people. The clients are all highly educated. The lawyers are really sophisticated. And in some respects, they sort of love to find your mistakes. Right, they love to show their client, my billing rate is so much worth because look at the work product that the other side is producing. Right, look at the mistakes we had to correct, and so it's pretty intense. It is a really tough. I would say most people they get in it, they're like, it's not worth it. For me, I found it thoroughly. I found it really hard. And there were times, there's no doubt, I was throwing my hands saying, this is just ridiculous. But I also enjoyed just the motivation, the pressure to just constantly be getting better and better and better, and to recognize that everything I do produce generally is going to be scrutinized and read, and that's motivating. It sort of encourages you to continue to progress and do better and work hard and not just sort of get, sort of fat and lazy, as they say.
So you're there at Baker Botts and working really hard, really long hours, trying to make the partners happy. Tell me about the inner workings of like if someone is able to get into a Baker Botts, like how do you make that work? Yeah. And by work, I'm not talking about family juggling. I mean, you became a partner at Baker Botts.
Yeah, and I had a pretty unique.
How does that happen in a firm? And I think it had to do with some of your earlier work experience.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah, so I had. One of the things I had like Mayday Pest Control and then Moxie Pest Control. I was an associate and I had a client that was generating steady work, smaller work, but there's the type of a client that paid their bills. You pay your bills if they're right, you pay them. You may not. And so having some clients when you're like a fourth year associate at a big firm was pretty rare. And so that was very useful for me to have my relationship with you and your willingness to, we didn't do big stuff, but we did some acquisitions, we did some trademark protection, some corporate formation. And so, it looks good for the partners to see, like, why does Anderson, he's actually generating his own revenue. No one else is doing that. And then I ended up getting a couple of, lucky breaks. You sort of create your own luck, but also there is luck. And I started at these smaller firms, and by just the nature of the work to keep the bills low for really small clients, often the young associates have to take the first chair position. You have to just sort of get thrown in the fire and you have to run the deal. And so I was comfortable doing that by the time 4 years later when I'm at Baker Botts. And I had three experiences that just made my path to partner really, frankly, pretty easy, as far as I had to just do a good job. I was doing a deal. We were doing a little bit of work for American Airlines, and they needed somebody in corporate to help their in-house lawyer. So the Americans said, we don't want a high billing rate, but we want someone that can, do a good job. So they said, well, throw in Anderson, right?
Some of your smart guys over here.
Yeah, but it was a newer client, so they also want someone who's going to go there and, they're going to enjoy working with them.
But it's also American Airlines.
Yeah, that's right. And we were doing a big deal with IBM to buy a bunch of their equipment for the back office, like a bunch of computers, just a really big procurement deal. And so I was just helping them deal this one big contract. And when we had that signed up, the business person came over to me, the American Airline person who was running the purchase, said, we worked well together. I was just sort of some lawyers are sort of jerks, and I respected, people from the receptionist to the top of the thing. You treat everybody the same, right? It's just sort of ingrained in you. Everybody is of equal value kind of a thing. And so he liked me, and he told me, look, I have this new initiative I need to do, which is we have been tasked to sell our airline tickets directly to the consumer, which has never been done through this thing called the internet, this brand new thing. And it was sort of brand new at the time. And before, I used to go to a travel agent, and they would go to a central reservation system, and the central reservation system would cut deals with the airlines. And there's all these middle people that are taking their cut, and you have this paper ticket. And Americans like, we want to actually bypass all these people and sell directly to the consumer. One of the greatest successes of early e-commerce was travel. The idea that people could go in and pick their own flight was just amazing to people. So we said, we need to get a website, and I have no idea what a website is. And do you know anything about websites? And I said, I know everything there is to know about websites, and I had no idea what a website was either. I mean, I knew, but I didn't know how you structure them, how you form them, how you actually document them. And so I went home and did a bunch of research, figured out what I needed to know, and then I got involved with doing the hosting agreement for AA.com, which is now one of the most, busiest, lucrative websites in the world for travel. So I did that, and then we started doing all these deals with these brand new startups. These are fledgling little companies. They had a little bit of VC money, little teeny companies called Priceline and Orbitz and Expedia. And so I was doing all of these deals with American to make their flights available on these online travel agencies. So I did that for 2 or 3 years, had an office out at American. I was going back and forth a lot.
But your partners, I'm assuming, like this, right? Because you go in for this one piece of business and you turn it into
and I'm generating hundreds of thousands of dollars of work. That's right. And I am the only lawyer in Baker Botts that knows what's going on. There's not a partner.
They can't replace you.
I am working with the general counsel, not the general counsel. I'm working with one of their in-house lawyers. He's sort of my pseudo partner. And so all the people at Baker Botts, all they just see are these bills coming in with American that they're paying. And like the partner's like, who's doing this?
And if you leave, if American's going with you.
Right.
I mean,
I'm the relationship. That's right. And I'm a fourth or fifth year lawyer. So I have, Moxie Pest Control stuff
coming in.
You're
the relationship and all the knowledge.
That's right. I have American stuff coming in, and nobody else can do it.
Right.
I mean, I'm like, at the time, I was one of the few people in the country that knew how to do these deals, because American was the largest airline in the world or one of the largest. They were one of the first ones to do this, and I was the only lawyer doing it.
I wouldn't go to this yet, but I'll be curious how that prepared you for your general counsel position. But anyway,
that's exactly what flips into my general counsel.
Yeah.
So and then about the same time, when all of a sudden the partners are thinking, okay, this guy's like a gold mine, right? You send him to clients love this guy. And part of why they loved it is because the work that I turned in, they had confidence in it, and they didn't have to have some partner looking at it, right? And so we had another client.
And then instead of sending you in and then having clients complain and argue about their bills, they send you in, clients love it, and then the bills get bigger.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. And so we had another client called GTE, which used to be used to have AT&T used to own everything. They broke up AT&T into all the bells, and and so you have, so the big AT&T breakup in the 80s, and then AT&T had to house all of their long distance call in a separate company called GTE.
So this is thing number 2.
Yeah.
Thing number 1 is American Airlines.
American's still going.
Path the partner.
Yeah.
And now we're on thing 2.
So this is all American Airlines is still going.
Okay.
It's just right in the middle of it. GTE is going in the middle of a merger with a company called Bell Atlantic, which is the big Bell in the Northeast from the old AT&T empire. And Bell Atlantic and GTE are combining to form a new company. And the new company, I remember the day this came out, we were always we're just sort of waiting to figure out what's the name of the company going to be, because they were going to call it something different. And the company was called Verizon. So this is the birth of Verizon.
I remember when that happened. Didn't it sound so weird? Like,
yeah.
What a ridiculous name.
It's the horizon, but there's a vertex to it or something. They made up this word. And it was brilliant, right? Because they own it. So this is when Verizon is being born. This is the birth of Verizon. And GTE called in Baker Botts. One of the lawyers said, look, as we're getting ready to do this deal, we have to divest ourselves of a bunch of our businesses, either because to get regulatory approval for the merger or just because the combined company doesn't want to do this. For example, one of the things they needed to sell was their cable television business. So GTE had a cable television business in Florida, California, and Hawaii. And they had these enterprise software businesses in that. They're very busy at GTE. So GTE calls Baker Botts and says, just loan us a lawyer that can do, like the sweet spot, right? That lawyer can do, he or she can do all the work by themselves. We don't want to pay partner rates, but we want somebody who can actually act like a partner. And we're not doing a lot of work for GTE at the time, and we're doing no work for Verizon because Bell Atlantic was in New York. And so Baker Botts is like, hey, let's, who can we send in there that will, the client will like, will do good work, and then will maybe generate a long relationship? Well, send in Anderson. It worked well at American, right?
I just want to point out, that's not really lucky, right? I mean, you have partners who are acting in their best interest with the clients are doing. And
but I'm lucky that these things are all happening at the same time.
Everything that you did led up to them choosing you.
Yeah, or just, and it also...
You didn't get to choose yourself.
So I go to GTE, which becomes Verizon very quickly. They give me a badge. I have an office, and I ended up doing Verizon work for several years, including post-merger, where all my contacts then moved to New York. So then all of a sudden I transitioned to where I'm working a lot in New York City, which I loved. I thought it was a blast. And so for several years, I did Verizon deals. And again, it's the same situation. No one at my firm was supervising or involved in my work. Matter of fact, I was pulling in partners to help me. So I'm a 5th or 6th year associate, and my direct report, for the most part, and the person who I'm working closely with, is a senior M&A lawyer in New York at Verizon. So if you're Baker Botts...
Sounds like you didn't need the third thing to me.
Well, the third thing was the third thing is we have another company called Lennox, air conditioning company. And they were going public, and we were taking them public. They were an institutional client. But they also had, which I won't go into, a reason why they had to go and acquire all of their dealerships, mostly through Canada. And they called Baker Botts, like that our in-house lawyers are busy. We do not want to pay for partner time. We just want that lawyer that can do all the work for a reasonable price. And I was, again, seconded to Lennox, to where I did like 85 deals in like a year period, just tons of deals.
Jeez.
While I'm doing, and so that was sort of my.
It's more than one
That's
week.
it was. I spent a lot of time in Canada.
It's a lot of writing.
So that's a very unique associate life, because I was officing as much at Lennox and Verizon and GTE as I was in my office.
And American.
And American. And so as I'm coming up for partner, I was really bizarrely unique, because if you look at what I'm working on, hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal fees are coming in, and no partner at the firm owns them. They're just sort of these. We had to put a partner somewhere, because every partner sort of has to own them. But and so I was like this unicorn of and again, all the associates around me, they were all good, and they were all hard workers, and so there was an element of luck to it. I think that actually probably what really was my greatest resource was literally my mission experience, my church experience. Just I had this experience of just interacting with people, from serving in the church, from going on a mission, that just the Harvard and Stanford and Yale people that were my colleagues didn't. And
your faith's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
That's right.
So you were an LDS missionary in Alaska.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that was the only thing that was really unique to me compared to all the other associates. If you're going to just drop somebody into a really sophisticated client group of people. And so I'm coming up for a partner, and Lennox has made an offer for me to go in-house. So they want me to stay and go here permanently. And I actually accepted it. And so I accepted to be an assistant general counsel at Lennox. I mean, I knew this company backwards and forwards, and so I'm sitting down with the partner at Baker Botts, the head of the corporate section in Dallas, and I'm telling him I'm gonna leave, and he takes me to dinner at a place called Bob's Steak and Chop House in Dallas, that's where all the that's where all the Mavs go and all the Cowboys. It's a great place, great food, and
it's a great
and we got this little table in the corner, and he sat there for 3.5 hours and almost wouldn't let me go until I agreed to stay at Baker Botts. And it was like, well, pretty much like, I can't guarantee everything, but I will go to bat for you for partner. I think we're going to be able to get you up a year early, and blah, blah, blah. So, it's really a bizarre set of circumstances, to where a BYU law grad essentially had, surrounded by a bunch of Harvard and Yale and, things, essentially the smoothest path to partner that I seemed to be aware of what was going on there, Not like a lot of other people make partners.
Sounds like you could have started Anderson Law and had like 3 huge clients too.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, those 3 probably would have, which again was just, it wasn't common at Baker Botts at the time.
Right.
Because usually associates work with firm clients, or they're working under partners, and the partners control the thing. And I was the relationship partner with the M&A work at Verizon. I was the relationship partner with all the e-commerce work at American. I was not the relationship partner with Lennox. That was very much under the umbrella. But it was just a steady flow.
But they were asking you to be their assistant general counsel.
Yeah, that's right.
So this partner, what did he do to?
And again,
was he just tenacious, or did he give some good
arguments?
arguments
Yeah, so his name is Andy Baker. He ended up being the head of the firm. And Andy was
not Baker.
No, not Baker. He was a Brooklyn Jew.
Okay.
Who
did you get the Hebrew in at all?
A little bit,
yeah.
Not very practicing, but But he was also
I meant you in the conversation. Did you break out your Hebrew?
No, he wasn't really practicing. I think I knew more Hebrew than he knew. Yeah. But he was also a stand-up comedian. He put himself through Cornell Law School as a stand-up comedian and a cab driver. And this guy I really enjoyed working with him. A lot of people really struggled because he was intense. He was one of the most intense lawyers I've ever worked with. He's an incredibly talented lawyer. But when you go into a negotiation with Andy Baker, when you're on the same side of him, for a 2-hour negotiation, it's like 15 hours of prep. I mean, he is the most prepared. He's just a good lawyer. Represents. So anyway, he also didn't lose. He wasn't used to losing much, and so he gave me his entire speech and had figured out he hadn't convinced me to stay. And so he literally started over and gave me the exact speech again. Like, we're there 3.5 hours. They're closing up the place. And I'm like, fine, I will stay if I can just go home, kind of a thing. Which ended up being the best. If I look at when there were, inspirations in my life or God sort of intervened, one of the times was through Andy Baker, which was not really a God-fearing man, I will say. But because staying ended up being the best decision.
So he was still his son. So
what's that?
Andy was still God's son. So
yeah, that's true. And so I stayed, became partner, stayed there for 8 more years or 9 more years, 12. I can't remember how many it was.
Was Andy there the whole time?
Yeah. And that.
Did he ever come to you and say, "Hey, remember? Aren't you glad I got you to stay over
at
Bob?" Yeah.
Yeah, he had a good memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a good memory. And so I did, and then I sort of moved around and did a lot of real estate for a while. I did a lot of public offerings I ended up getting too expensive. 9/11 hit, which wiped out the American work. That just sort of shut everything down. And then same thing with Verizon. I finished up some Verizon deals, and then now I'm a partner. Now I'm getting really expensive, and I got rotated into another set of work that I did, which was real estate, REIT work. And I got some REIT expertise from the prior firm, and I was the only one at Baker Botts at the time who really had any real REIT expertise. They're sort of a unique animal. And one of our biggest clients was a company called Hines down in Houston. They develop downtown Class A office space, just one of the most prestigious real estate developers in the world. And they wanted to form a REIT, and they wanted to raise $2 billion, lever it up to $6 billion, and buy $6 billion worth of property. And they came to the Houston folks and asked them, "Who's your REIT person?" And the Houston folks are like, email firm-wide, "Any REIT people here?" And somebody said, "Oh, you go talk to Anderson. He actually did a bunch of REIT work at a prior firm." So I get recruited in away from the Dallas work, and then for the next 3 or 4 years, I primarily worked on this REIT work for Hines. And I did a lot of their private equity stuff too, because we did some private REITs as well.
And that's as a partner?
Yeah, as a partner. So I spent the next several years primarily, I had my own little stuff on the side as well, but I spent a lot of time working with that company. It was actually a lot of fun. It was a good company. And then I did a bunch of hedge fund or VC fund work and tech work, and then I did some oil and gas stuff, a couple of IPOs with some oil and gas midstream companies. So I was sort of all over the board.
So tell me about the transition. How did you end up with Match Group?
So I've been a partner for a long time, and I'm sort of in this place where what you work for is just more money, and I like money, but the money doesn't excite me that much. I'm not a big spender, and so that wasn't overly exciting to me. But
plus, by that time, let's be fair, you've been a partner for how long?
I've been a partner for 8 years.
You've made a lot of money.
Yeah, the partners do well there.
Yeah. What's the average income?
I think the average draws then. I didn't stay long enough to make average, but I don't know, like 1.7.
Yeah.
I think, or 1.6 million was probably the average.
Yeah.
Of share of profits.
So that's not.
Yeah, you can afford to live on that.
So there you are. You've been around for 8 years as a partner, and then thinking.
Yeah, and then an opportunity popped up to go in house, and going in house being general counsel of a big company is sort of a different challenge.
What do you mean popped up?
Actually,
because Match Group never contacted me.
No, well, and again, it's sort of the same way I went to Baker Botts. I was actually talking to Kimberly Clark. Somebody found out that I was thinking about going in house, and so one of the lawyers, a young associate that worked with me, named Jay Radine, on the Verizon work, had since gone to Cooley and then a firm called Wilson Sonsini, which is a really well-known venture capital firm in the West Coast. Went to Colorado, and then he went back at Wilson or Brobeck. He was sort of bouncing around some tech firms in Austin.
Did he make his way over to Match, or?
No, he didn't. But he was really successful, super good lawyer. Word got to him that I was looking around, and his wife was general counsel at Match. And so his wife, whose name is Marshall Dye, called me and said, if you're interested in going in-house, do you want to talk about match? What sort of found out later is Marshall and Jay had 2 kids, and she was going to have her third, and she was looking for an assistant general counsel, but she was also looking for someone to replace her. Mm-hmm. And even the CEO wasn't even thinking about this, but she was. But she wasn't quite sure because she just wanted somebody strong as assistant general counsel to help her with sort of her career track as well. And so she told me, no guarantee, but chances are you could probably roll in this position, in the near future. I just wanted to go to get being an in-house lawyer is a totally different skill set than being an outside lawyer. Outside lawyer, you can just say no to everything, right? Just can't do that. It's illegal. But you can't do that in-house. In-house, you have to solve problems. You can't just say no. If you do, you're a lousy, you're just throwing sand in the gears for everything.
It sounds like you're also doing a lot of stuff. I mean, if there's litigation, even though you're not a litigator,
that's right.
You got to go find the litigators and be a part of it and be leading the team of the direction, right? I mean, is that right?
Yep. Well, yeah. It's.
But you said earlier that there's sending out emails. Who here knows how to do REIT work? Well, Anderson does. But if you're a general counsel, it just comes to you and you deal with it.
And sometimes
whether you know it or not, right?
Sometimes you don't want to send it out because it's just a nuisance. And it's become, as partners you get more and more expensive, you start to really narrow the stuff you can do. And I really enjoyed a lot of the stuff outside of my billing right now. I mean, it would be really hard to represent Moxie.
Yeah.
There's a point to where it's just not worth your money to spend those rates. But I really enjoyed doing that work. And plus I had this in the back of my mind, this old American Airlines internet e-commerce world, which is it's a riot of a place to be a lawyer in the e-commerce world. It's just the Wild West. There are hardly any. The litigation is way behind. I'm talking the litigation. The legislation is way behind. There's just not a lot of law. I mean, it's just you have to solve problems because things are changing so fast. So I really enjoyed doing the internet work with American.
Yeah.
This would give me a chance to get back into that space with one of the the 800-pound elephants in the industry. And so it was just like when I didn't go to the biggest firm in Salt Lake and I went to this little niche firm, which ended up being a really good decision. Instead of going to this really big, prestigious company, I went to this dating site, and people are just like, that's just such a bizarre decision. Well, again, it ended up being a great decision. So I went to Match. Marshall had her third child, and we sort of flipped. So I became general counsel, and she became my chief in-house lawyer of litigation. And it allowed her to really do some things at home.
Was that her background, litigation?
Yeah, she was more of a litigator, but she was a really extraordinarily talented lawyer. But this allowed her to have some flexibility and do some stuff, and so it worked out really well for her, I think, too. And then we just went on this massive acquisition spree, and we bought, as I just came in, we had bought People Media, which is a bunch of other sites, including like LDS Planet, and then we bought the biggest site back in Europe, and within a few years, its Match Group is getting really large. And then Tinder was developed. And so I am going to London. We had a company we bought in Ghent, Belgium, which I used to go visit quite a bit to help them. We had our headquarters in Paris, was right by the Paris Opera, just one of the best places in Paris. We had a great space in Rio, had some space in Tokyo. And then we bought Plenty of Fish, which is out in Vancouver, Tinder and People Media, where they're based in West Hollywood. OkCupid, which we bought, is based in New York City. And so I'm just going. I mean, it was a blast. My kids are out of high school now, and so we're just going to Europe. We're going to New York. I'm overseeing all these companies. It was a lot of fun. And being in space with online dating was something I had zero experience in, but the privacy issues and dealing with just the growth of social media was a lot of fun.
And what would you say was the highlight of like how were you benefited or how from the experience with Match Group?
Well, with the thing about being at Match in-house generally as it is. It's a totally different skill set. And I really enjoyed, the people I worked with were just fun. I loved working with our French group, the group in France. The Brits were fun to work with.
It sounds fun. I mean, just being able to go over to Europe and
we had our group in
emerging technology, the new space.
Yeah, and with a company that's just printing money, right? It's just printing money. I mean, it's just such a successful company. I mean, I looked at the last.
Who's the parent company?
It was IAC, which is Interactive Corp, which was Barry Diller's company, which used to own Ticketmaster and Expedia. One of the most successful, if not the most successful, interactive online business owners in the history so far.
Do you think without the American Airlines experience, you'd have?
I don't think I would have. I don't think I would have, and it gave me a good background to be able to just go in and just hit the ground running, because I knew a lot about how the legal risks of just infrastructure and how to deal with hacks. Anyway, so it was. We had our New York group was a bunch of MIT, Harvard, mathematician quants that were doing dating based on really complicated algorithms. Our LA group was a bunch of USC dropouts who were just like, the algorithms are worthless. All you need is a picture of somebody, and your brain will do all the analysis for you. You don't need the computers to do it. So very different business groups, very different approaches.
Watch, take a water.
They had the match groups, the things. We had the people in Dallas were, again, the smartest people in the room in social media and online dating. They've been doing it longer than anybody else. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed all the different people. We had, Match had been around for 15, 20 years, very mature. Tinder was this brand new, spunky, you need to give them room to innovate, like OkCupid. Then the Europeans were all different. Trying to crack online dating in Asia was a challenge, and all the legal issues there.
That's very different.
No, and so the variety was invigorating.
Europe would be different too. I mean, all of it.
Europe.
Must have been a lot of fun meetings too, like just in talking about what to do.
Because it's also a very simple concept, right? So it wasn't like this overly massively complicated. The concept's pretty simple, and so I enjoyed that. And then, of course, you just have the normal day-to-day stuff. You're just leases and dealing with HR issues and employment issues and just buying stuff and all the stuff that a lawyer in any company has to deal with.
Well, at the end, you prepared to go public. I mean, that must have been a lot of work.
Yeah, well, it was, but it wasn't, because IAC was public, and at the time, Match was far and away its largest segment.
Okay.
And so we were already operating like a public company.
All right.
Because we were essentially a public company.
Yeah.
And what we did have to do is we would allow some of our smaller startups a little more, would loosen up the controls and procedures to let them iterate and grow faster. And then when Match had to go become public on its own, we sort of push those down a little bit. But
seems like a lot of the things you'd be working on there would have, like everything about that job, would have even prepared you more to be a professor, but especially just the technology I'm just imagining all the different issues, litigation and other types of ownership issues that have to do with what's on a website.
Yep.
And what goes on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
What goes where on a website. I mean, that seems like there's a lot.
But
it's got to be a hot topic right now.
It touches everything, right? I mean, so that experience is really valuable for students to understand, because you go work for ExxonMobil, these old bricks and mortar, your grandpa's company, and if you don't have a good basis in sort of how e-commerce works and how things work online, you're not going to be as effective as a lawyer. I mean, even pest control, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even pest control, we're moving. If let's say hypothetically a company wants to move their onboarding of all their sales teams and employment onto an online platform, an online, tool, which is really effective and smart way to do it. Well, there are a bunch of privacy things at issue. There are a bunch of things like, how do you protect against unauthorized access? There's just a bunch of dynamics of legal issues that pop up. That.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah, if you can put a few
hypothetically,
if you can hypothetically put a few things up front to get some protections, it solves cleaning up a mess later. And so it ended up being a really useful experience, and probably the most useful was the idea that when somebody comes to you with a solution or a proposal, and you're by nature a lawyer and you're risk adverse, you just can't say no. you have to walk out of the room with a solution that your business team is happy with. And lawyers in law school, I think one of the things that my classes, I think students find very interesting is most classes, you have to be right, you have to be right, you have to be right. In my classes, is you have to be creative, you have to be a solution. And so there are generally not right or wrong answers. It is like, you got to solve it, but you cannot, unlike a litigator where you just win or lose, you just can't come out with no, just often can't be the answer.
Well, it just seems to me, correct me if this is wrong, but like when you go in-house, especially as a general counsel, then you're part of just the executive management team. I mean, you're a manager of the company. I mean, I know many people who became the CEO after being the general counsel.
Well, that's right. My old CEO was general counsel at 1.2.
So then what was the transition then to?
So yeah, I got an email one time.
Becoming Professor Anderson.
They described, I got an email from BYU Law about this idea that they're creating this new position. They need some transactional experiences for their students, and they want to have this really unique one, tenure track, full professor position that doesn't require research and publishing, and asked me if I would apply. And I really had no expectations that I'd ever be a college professor. And I looked at it and I thought, the pay cut will be real, but I think a lot of lawyers would love to teach in law school. I think most lawyers, frankly, especially big firm lawyers, I think, and but financially, I was in a position I could do it.
Yeah.
Financially, I was in a position that I could make a significant change, and it wouldn't impact my lifestyle at all. And there was just something about it that I thought, I at least ought to look at it. So I looked at it, and after 3 or 4 months of looking at it and interviewing, I decided that it'd be something that I would be worth to take a shot at. And so I took that position, and it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a good decision.
I have 3 more questions. You can be as brief as you want. Right. I know we both have places to be. But question number 1 is if you're looking at your career, if you could do anything differently, is there anything you do differently?
I don't think that there is. And I think that's more of, I mean, we've had this conversation. I think when we're sitting in Texas, we're both like, why would anybody live anywhere else, right? And then when you get to San Diego, I think your view is why would anybody live anybody else? And I think that's just sort of my worldview. My worldview is that I look at where I am, and no matter where I am, I can see a lot of good things, and I'm glad I'm there. And so I look back, I don't know that I would do anything differently.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. Question number 2.
I guess the key to life in some respects is setting very low expectations, because then you're satisfied, right?
That's my answer when people say, "What's the secret to success?" And I say, set really low goals.
And so yeah, I think that I think that for the most part, I tend to have a worldview where I'm obviously interested in doing new things and doing different things and pushing myself. But I just don't have a personality that looks back and like, oh, I wish I would have done this differently. Yeah.
Question 2. So back when we were in Texas and we were raising our kids, you just explained how busy you were, and you had travel all over the world, certainly all over Canada, the United States, New York. But you were always, as much as anyone I knew, involved in your church and your church callings and responsibilities and duties. You were the coach of your kids' teams, I think, like all of them. It just seems like I've known a lot of people who use work as an excuse not to get involved in those things, or that I'll do it later. And so this is 2 questions is one, how did you do it? And 2, similarly, what advice do you give to people that are kind of on your same career path when it comes to that life balance?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard at times. It's also extraordinarily fulfilling at times. I had it described to me once this way, which I really liked it, is if in my world, you'd have sort of this triangle. If you had a triangle of like elastic bands, you have at one point you have your family, and another point you have your in our case church community, and the third point you have your career. And there's always going to be, at least in my experience, there was always tension, right? There was always there's two of the sides, or sometimes all three of them at the same time, are pulling me, okay? And I had sort of come to the conclusion that as long as all three of them are sort of feeling pulled at the same time, that's the perfect situation. So in other words, I could be a better bishop, right? I could be a better elders quorum president. I could be a better young men's president. I could invest more time. I could be a better dad, or I could be spending more time at home, or I could be spending more time at the work. But
if you're acing being a better dad, then maybe you're not a very good bishop.
Yeah, if I have pulled this one all the way over, there's no tension over here, right? That is, if one of them is completely pulled out, and I am like the best dad in the world, then the one between church and work is going to be slack. Mm-hmm. It's just going to be completely out of it. And so if all of them are in tension, and I feel this pull at any given time that I could be doing a little bit better at any of the three of them, that's when I'm doing my best. And part of it is just an ego trip, right? You have to just give up the ego. Like I remember one of the hardest decisions I ever did is I gave up the reputation I had of being one of the highest billers every year at Baker Botts, because I started coaching on my kids' teams. I could do that when my kids were a little younger, but when they started getting into their later their elementary and middle school and high school years, I started really moving more of my time over to my kids. And so my hours went down, but they were still pretty good.
Well,
right?
Coaching sports teams is the only forgivable offense in Texas.
No, and I learned that trick pretty early on. I learned that trick that if I had a client or a partner come in and say, hey, look, I need the rest of your evening, to do this document, which probably could be the next day. And if I said, oh, my son's getting baptized, he would say, I just
get on the
have somebody film it. Yeah, just somebody film it and watch it later. Or if, so-and-so, I need to go do so-and-so for so-and-so, then I find somebody else to do it. But if you say in Texas, oh, I'm coaching a little league team or I'm coaching a soccer team, they're like, oh, you need to go do that, right?
Yeah.
We that's a great community service, right? And there were times when, I am rushing there and I'm, it's amazing. I had to spend some time in prison because I was changing from suits into soccer gear in the back of my car and in a park, and hoping that, police officer didn't come by. And so there were times when it was hectic and it was just cramming everything in. But at the same time, I think looking back, could I have been a better dad? Oh yeah, I certainly could have spent more time in that role. Could I have been a better elders quorum president or a better bishop and visited more people? And that? Yeah. Oh yeah, I could have spent a lot more time doing that. Could I have billed more hours? Yeah, I could have done that. But in all three scenarios, I think if you ask somebody, they would say, yeah, he's a good lawyer, or yeah, he's a good dad, or yeah, he's a good bishop. And I think being willing to be competent in all three and not have to be the best in any one of them is sort of how it worked for me.
And last question. I know that over time you've been involved in a lot of different organizations and giving your time freely. And I know right now you're involved here in Provo, and I think you're on the board of directors and maybe a little bit more of organization. I'd like you to, if you would, tell me how you've chosen the things to be involved in and why.
Yeah, so the first thing I really started getting involved in was when as I mentioned, I started coaching. I coached my daughter's basketball team, and I coached my son's basketball team and my son's soccer team, and then I coached a couple of baseball teams for my son. I didn't really help much with my daughter's soccer, and part of that, frankly, was just sort of selfishness in the sense I wanted to control their schedules. I wanted to be able to have a say when the practices were, to try to keep some church nights free and some Sundays free. And so it ended up being selfish at the beginning, but I ended up really loving it and just really enjoyed it. And then I learned pretty quickly also, it gave me this really, it forced me to be disciplined at work, because you just couldn't set up a practice at a city park with 16 fifth graders where a lot of their parents just drop them off and drive away and not be there. You cannot do that. And so that forced me to be really stern with some of my commitments at work, which was good. It was good for me. And I think actually people at my work actually respected that a lot too. So, but that would end up taking a lot of my time. Several hours a week would be involved in that. Well, once my kids roll off, and and move off into high school and graduate, I sort of have all this time on my hands. So when I moved to Utah, one of the things that I did find was it's called Encircle, which they own. They have Salt Lake, St. George, and Provo now. At the time, it was just Provo. And now they're looking at Logan and Heber, and they buy or build these homes that are sort of these safe places just for LGBTQ kids that are, trying to find a place to relax and or maybe they're having some problems at home on how they're being treated by their parents. Or at school or whatnot. And so that's just a place during the day they can go, and there's classes, and they have music and art and food, and they have lots of programs there, and they have some therapy as well. And so I ended up getting involved a lot with that organization when it started in Provo, and then I've done a lot of their legal work for them, pro bono, and now I've been on their board for a few years, and now I'm the chair of the board. And so that, at times that takes a decent amount of time, and it's fun. I enjoy that.
So chair of the Encircle board, which is a great organization.
Yeah, been really happy with it.
Do a lot of good. But you have a limited time. I'm assuming you're only the chair.
I have a lot more time now than I used to.
You're only probably the chair of one organization like that? Right now?
Yeah.
Why Encircle?
That's good. I don't know. I mean, I have I think that within members of our church, just the whole, relationship with the LGBT community within the church and outside of the church has been very perplexing for me for quite a while. I think it's perplexing for a lot of people. I think it's perplexing just because I think most people are very confident or comfortable, I would assume, that where we are now is not where we're going to be in 3 years and 5 years and 10 years from now. It's the benefit of our religious organization is there's a very evolving, additional revelation concept, more to come. And so I guess one of the reactions that I have had with trying to figure out what answers to that question is sort of stay in your lane is sort of the answer I sort of came up with myself is like, it's not your job to fix or correct or tell the church where it needs to go. It's your job to help people. And if you feel like I did, that there were people that we could do more as a community to help and just give them some help to just, and these are like teenagers, right? They just need a little bit of
people in need too.
Yeah,
right? I mean, like this is very real need.
We all need somebody to just sort of put our arms around sometimes and just say, hey, what can I do to help you? And so, sort of the stay in my lane thought I had, which is was more of, you have two things. You can sit around and complain about things you don't think that are moving fast enough, or you can get off your butt and do something and just go to help people. You don't have to wait for somebody to give you an assignment to help people. Just go do something. And so I think that was the real motivation for Encircle was I felt like more needed to be done. And I saw a lot of people around me just whining and complaining about what churches are or aren't doing, which was accomplishing nothing in my mind. And so I just thought, well, I should just do something. If I actually feel that people could use a little bit of help. Don't complain that somebody else is not helping them. You go do it. And so I came across, it was Steve and Barbara Young in California, and
the quarterback Steve Young.
Yeah,
I
mean, it's mostly his wife is behind it, but he is very supportive of her with that. She was on the board with me for a while, and she still is, but she's rolling off. And then Tom Christopherson were the two people that drew me into it, and then I've just met a lot of other people besides that. It's been fun. It's a great organization. I really enjoy it. And
it sounds like it's been expanding, and do you see a lot of good's being done? Anything that members of the community that you'd ask other people to do as board? Yeah,
the thing about Encircle that there are volunteering opportunities, which you can go to the website on encircle.com and I think it's Encircle together. And of course, anytime people are looking for places to donate money, they're always, they're limited by the amount of money they have. And so they're always looking for people that want to support them financially or support them with time. And there's,
Well, thanks for all the work that you've done with that organization. And I mean, I feel like that organization, some of the work that you're doing, we reach out is saving lives and meaningfully impacting people.
Dealing with the suicides was a fundamental objective of the organization early on, was to try to curb the high suicide rate in Utah. And I think they've done a meaningfully good job of that. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah,
so it's
really
an honor and privilege to have you. I appreciate you sharing your life journey. Of course, we're only halfway there.
Yeah.
So everyone I know watching this is going to think that I'm older than you because all my gray hair, but that's not true.
No,
you're way older than I am.
I wouldn't say way older.
I know. I'm just. I don't know if I told you this, but I gathered there's a family that I was meeting with, and it has like their kids were 3 to 12 years old, and I said, "How old do you think I am?" And then they were talking about it, and as they're about to give me their answer, I said, "If you come within 2 years, I'll give you." And I came up with a candy incentive. And then they got serious.
Yeah.
And they huddled together after conferencing. One comes, "Oh, we think you're," and someone grabbed, no, pulled them back in, looking over. They paused. Remember, this is 4 kids between 3 and 12, and then confidently said, 72. I was 47, so I'm 49 now, and so
that's funny.
Anyway,
no,
I'm just envying your hair. That's all.
No,
your non-gray hair.
I tend to look. I'm actually envying your hair because when I was at Verizon, they used to call me Doogie Howser, which I don't know you remember them. Yeah. Because I tend to look younger than I am, and so I'm out there. I'm their lawyer, and this was 20 years ago, and I was a young lawyer, but they're used to with like lawyers and airline pilots. You like a little gray around the ears, right? Someone who's actually been through some challenging experiences.
Doctors.
And they know how to react. Doctors, you sort of like the young ones, though.
Okay.
You don't want something like, here's some castor oil, right? This is how we did it in 1950. You sort of want that one that's like.
It's true. It's true.
And so, I really aspired to get a little gray in my hair so people take me serious.
Well, you can go and get some coloring done.
Yeah.
But we can go to the same person.
The fake gray.
And we say, I need more of his color. He wants a little bit more of mine.
Yeah. See, when I get in there, whenever last time, a little while ago, Margie's like, you need to get Jason's hair. You just look so much more respectable than you do.
I don't believe you at all.
No, it's the honest truth.
Well, again, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you taking
My
time to
pleasure.
meet. I think this is good. I hope this is helpful I know it's going to be helpful for people that are contemplating their careers. And well done on a life well lived so far.
Well, thank you.
And thanks for 20-something years of friendship.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about.
I won't admit to any more than that.
Yeah, no, I would. It's Ben. This is my relationship with Moxie has gone back. I was talking to, I think it was Phil, and I had to who was it, or Fleming or somebody, and I had to remind them that my relationship with Moxie goes back
Beyond
much
theirs.
farther than any of the current owners, and every once in a while I need to remind them of that.
I've been around 15 years, and you're like, yeah, I predate you by a lot.
Yeah, I predate you by, and I have the highest esteem for what you've done with Moxie and how you run it and the company. It's been one of the highlights of my life is having that continuity of this company through now. It's been really a lot of fun. I'm glad to see the success you're all enjoying.
Yeah, well, thank you.
All right.